Good morning. In today's Gospel, two people come together who outwardly seem very distant, but who deep down, in the suffering that each of them was carrying, there are points of convergence. In the short version of the Gospel, only one appears, which is Jairus. In the long version, we can see the interaction with the sick woman. In what things Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, and the sick woman seem different. First, the background and the status of these two people. Jairus is an influential person and wealthy, while the woman is poor and she's going through an economic crisis and she's socially rejected. Jesus doesn't favor one over the other. Neither does he shun Jairus because of his money and social status, nor does he ignore the woman because of her poverty and marginalization. Christ doesn't make distinctions between people, just like pain, suffering, sickness, or death. The evangelist tells us that Jairus was one of the chief men of the synagogue. At that time, the synagogues were practically closed to Jesus. He was a persona non grata. Let's remember that the last time he had been in the synagogue of Capernaum, the Pharisees joined the Herodians in order to destroy Jesus because on a Sabbath he had healed a man with a withered hand. And now Jairus, one of the chief men of the synagogue, perhaps of that same synagogue of Capernaum, came to Jesus to heal his sick daughter. It's not hard to imagine how difficult it must have been for him to ask Jesus for help. Jairus could lose his entire reputation if his act of faith in Jesus reached the ears of the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. The sick bleeding woman, a woman who for 12 years had suffered permanent bleeding due to her irregular menstrual cycle. During the period of menstruation, the Jewish woman is considered impure from a religious point of view. So this poor woman had been impure every day of her life over her last 12 years. Rejected like a leper, she could not even be touched. Whoever touched her was unclean too. As the book of Leviticus describes, she soiled even the bed in which she slept and the chair on which she sat, and these objects then transmitted her impurity to whoever touched them. Given the ease with which a man could divorce his wife, surely her husband had divorced her. Her condition would make it impossible for her to find a partner or a job as a domestic servant. She was completely isolated from any social contact as a leper, and this kind of isolation must have been almost unbearable. It's clear that this woman was an outsider, a person who doesn't count, who does not belong. Another difference, the notion of time. Now that it's time for the soccer competitions of Copa America or the European Cup of Nations, we see how the feeling of time, the perception of time is very relative for the different teams. For the team that is losing and needs to score a goal, the clock is ticking too fast and they are desperate to run out of minutes. They don't have a second to lose or to waste. On the other hand, for the team that is winning and is disqualified if it concedes a goal, the time passes very, very slowly. The 5 minutes of added time are eternal for someone and blink of an eye for the others. Time is very relative, as Albert Einstein said. Now, going back to the Gospel, for Jairus, time passes very fast, too fast. He's running out of time and every second counts. His daughter is dying while Jesus is walking home. He would like to stop time, that the clock would not advance, for every second that passes snatches away the life of his sick daughter and eats away his hopes. In fact, it seems that Jesus arrives too late, for by the time he gets home, his daughter is already dead. On the other hand, for the sick woman, Her illness and her condition of social and religious exclusion made time pass very slowly, for it brought her much suffering, a constant and a perpetual agony. The woman considered that her situation was already unbearable, and yet she was condemned day after day to have to endure it. Like the myth of Sisyphus, who, punished by the gods, had to push a stone up a mountain which, before reaching the top, rolled back down, this sick woman seemed punished by life to carry the stone of her illness day after day, and to be disappointed in all the attempts she made to cure herself, leaving all her wealth behind. Unlike Jairus, who had much to lose by approaching Jesus, this bleeding woman had nothing to lose. She could only gain, for she had already lost everything: money, health, reputation, and so on. How are Jairus and the sick woman similar? Both have faith in the power of Jesus, and that faith leads them to do something that they would have never done if they had any other choice. Jairus, for example, approaching and asking Jesus for help, and the sick woman touching the Master. The sick woman's gesture of touching Jesus is not like what happens at the rock concerts, where all the fans in the front row want to touch the singer as he approaches. The sick woman didn't really want to touch Jesus because she thought, she was convinced that if she, impure, touched Jesus, she would contaminate him, she would harm him. Her desire to be cured, her faith, and her respect for the person of Jesus were all mixed up in her. Therefore, she chose to touch Jesus as little as possible, the fringe of his cloak. In this way, I do not touch him, but I will obtain his healing power. So it's not that she wasn't able to touch Jesus any closer, but she didn't want to, because she didn't want to contaminate him. Both the case of Jairus'daughter and that of the bleeding woman deal with ritual impurity. The woman isn't clean because of her flow of blood. The girl is not clean because she is dead. Touching a dead is against the Torah, which terms unclean whoever touches a dead body, as Leviticus and the book of Numbers explain. Such a person must stay outside the camp. But Jesus, as in the case of Simon's mother-in-law, takes her by the hand to bring her back to life. Jesus not only lays his hand on the girl, as Jairus wanted, but touches the corpse, thus violating the law of ritual purity. What does this action of Jesus teaches us? In the case of the sick woman, to touch Jesus is to contaminate him with her impurity, but to the surprise of the woman and to the scandal of the rigorist of the law of purity, instead of the contamination entering the person of Jesus, his saving power comes out from him, his purity, his healing power. There is no one who is too unworthy to approach God, who defiles God. In the case of Jairus'daughter, if there was such a hurry, why didn't the Lord then act as in the story of the servant of the Roman soldier, in which a word was enough to heal him immediately, ipso facto, from the distance, thus avoiding the suffering of the father and the very death of the girl? Perhaps Jesus wanted to take Jairus to a much deeper level of faith. For Jairus, Jesus could solve difficult cases. He could heal, but not raise a dead person from the dead. And Jesus helps him to deepen his faith. I can not only heal the sick, I can raise from the dead. I can go even deeper. I am even more powerful than what you think. When Jesus seems to ignore us, perhaps he's wanting to take us to a deeper level of faith and of relationship with him, to make us witnesses of his saving action in areas we would never have imagined. In both stories, the Greek word sotho, the verb to save, is important. Jesus says to the woman, "Daughter, your faith has saved you," sesoken. Sotho can refer to healing or deliverance from danger, but in the Old Testament often is used to refer to the salvation of the Israelites. The stories of Jairus'daughter and the woman are not only stories of physical healing, but also stories of salvation. Not only was the body healed, but the soul was saved. And God bless you.